First of all, like, how did you get your passion for journalism?
Well, I mean, when I was growing up and I was a kid, I grew up in a small town, Mahopac, New York, and I was like an okay athlete. I wasn't amazing or anything. I was a pretty competitive runner, but I used to like. I used to, no one else in my family cared about sports at all. Nobody. And for some reason, I don't know how, I really I used to find myself, I'd be the only guy watching the Super Bowl in the house, and I'd be sitting in front of the TV with a football, or during the World Series or the All-Star games or just Yankee games or Mets games, I'd be sitting there with a mitt and a ball, and I'd be throwing the ball to myself. And I just had this love for, like, the uniform colors and the different personalities, and I grew up in a really white, sort of conservative town, and I loved, like, afros and really cool names, and, like, it was almost like sports sort of opened my eyes to the world, and, like, it wasn't just, like, what I was seeing around me in my little white conservative town. It was, like, this whole world of different colors and cultures and languages and names, and I think it just did it for me. It got me really, really excited, and I became a writer. I really started writing for my high school newspaper, Mahopac High School. And initially I just loved the sort of attention it got you, which is not the reason I write now, but I loved how, like, I was just some geek runner, but if you wrote a story saying that cheerleading isn't a sport, all of a sudden all the cheerleaders are surrounding you in the cafeteria, and, how could you say this about us? How could you say this about us? And it was like this, like, it just kind of was intoxicating, I guess the power of the pen. And that was sort of on my way. I wrote for my college paper and then sort of started my career in the profession.
How can, like, they really show their audience that they're really passionate about what they like write about?
Well, I mean, I think the one thing that like writers who, I don't know what you consider making it or not making it, right? But, like, I think the writers who go pretty far in the business, Yeah. I think the one thing they do is they take every story, they want every story to be their best. That sounds simple, but it's really true. Like, I'm not saying I'm, an all-time great writer, blah, 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 but every story I write, dating back to high school and college, I want it to be my best. And I think far too many college students, what they do for the college, like, you'll be reading a college newspaper, and it'll be, the Sioux Falls football team defeated Delaware State 38-28 today behind 4 touchdown passes. And it drives me crazy. It makes me cringe because you're not just writing for your audience, the small college newspaper. You're writing for potential employers. So every story, I want to read about the smell, about the taste, about the look. I want to see the blood trickling out of his nose. I want to feel what it was like to be there and hear the sound. Don't just tell me, show me. And I think, like, if college writers want to make it and write for Sports Illustrated or ESPN or Yahoo or whatever, CBS Sportsline, it starts at the college newspaper and at that level by making everything as exceptional as you possibly can. And I think that's how you separate yourself, because there's so many people who want to write, sports. It's a pretty competitive field, and the ones who really make it are not the ones writing standard leads about so-and-so beating so-and-so behind 2 touchdown passes. They're starting off their stories by painting a scene or by describing a moment or by getting into the head of a coach at a tense situation. That's what separates the great from just the good and the average.
Cool. More like the next one, like, how have you developed your own writing style? Or
I would say, it started in college. I went to the University of Delaware, and when I was in college, there was a guy named Mike Freeman who now writes for CBS Sports Online. And he used to, when I was in college, Mike Freeman covered, like, the New Jersey Nets and then the New York Giants for the New York Times. And I would read everything Mike wrote, but I wouldn't just read it. I would pay attention to how he transitioned, how he leaves, what quotes he was using, how he would end his story. And I would read Sports Illustrated, and I would read that thing like it was the Bible, cover to cover. And I would pay attention, again, I'd pay attention to transitions and word choice and how things were being done and, how they would approach a story and how to approach the story differently and what cliches they were avoiding. And so I really think for myself, it's kind of a matter of stealing, where you see stuff you love and you incorporate it into your own arsenal, and I think there are little bits and pieces I've picked up from different writers along the way that I've sort of incorporated on my own. And the other thing I teach journalism at a college near my house, and I'm baffled and sort of disappointed in how few of my students read regularly, read good writing, read the New York Times, read Sports Illustrated, read the Wall Street Journal, read whatever, Grantland, and I think if you want to become a great writer or a good writer, you have to read good writing to pick up how to do it.
Our young journalists, if they want, they want to be, they have to be constantly reading and then constantly refining their craft.
So how do you do it?
Yeah.
You you write your ass off, and you just I was writing everything. I would have internships during college. I interned one summer at the Champaign-Urbana News Gazette. I made $5 an hour. I was halfway across the country away from home. I was absolutely miserable, and I was begging for every story to write, everything. When I interned the summer after that at the Nashville Tennessean, if they needed someone to write about a house for sale, I'd be begging to do it. If they needed someone to write about some country singer who broke his leg, I'd beg to do it. So I wanted to write about everything, and every story I wrote, I tried to make my best, and the value of just busting your butt and working really hard and reading your own stuff. I hear people say I never read my own writing, and I read my own writing over and over and over again, and I try to see everything I did wrong, and the things I did right. It's just it's sort of a craft, just like anything else. And if you work hard enough at knitting, you become a good knitter. If you practice the guitar enough, you become Eddie Van Halen. And I feel like to be a good writer, the number one most important thing is just to work on it and practice it and read it and examine it and break it down and build it back up. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people do who succeed in the field.
Okay. I would just say like a sports writer, you always want to be credible and honest, but you want to be without bias. And I think earlier you told me in a few emails, you said you don't want to be a fan, you want to be a fan of the game, not a fan of the player or the team.
That's true. I haven't rooted for. Whenever I hear someone, every once in a while, someone will misidentify me as a Mets fan because as a kid I grew up rooting for the Mets, and my first book was about the Mets. I'm not a Mets fan. I'm not a fan of any. The one thing, like when I hear people say like, "Oh, I'm a huge sports fan. I really would love to have your job." A lot of times I say, "I don't think you would love my job because you're not rooting for it. And if anything, you lose your fandom because you see, it's like to use a Wizard of Oz analogy. You see the little man behind the curtain. Like the magic of baseball and the mystique of baseball. Well, if you want to see that, you don't want to go into a clubhouse and see these guys farting, and like talking trash to one another and just being disgusting and rude and dismissive and kind of dumb, So for me, it isn't that hard. It's not hard to be unbiased. I've been doing this a long time. But if you're a fan of a team or you're a real diehard fan, I think being a sports writer probably isn't the profession for you. I think maybe going into media relations or public relations is probably a better field.
What advice would you have for a sports writer, like a person that wants to be a sports writer?
I think you guys have a lot of, like, if you're coming up in college now, I'm not that, I guess I'm ancient by your world. I'm only 40, right? And I graduated in 1994 from Delaware. And when I was coming up, to reach out to a sports editor or to reach out to anyone in sports, you'd write a letter, you'd send it off, you'd hope someone would reply. You didn't have, not even everyone had email at the time, Now, with Twitter, with Facebook, with 8 gazillion other outputs, there's no excuse not to reach out to people. If you want to reach out to the sports editor of the New York Times or a sports writer at the New York Times or the editor of Sports Illustrated, they're all right there in front of you. So, and also there's no, it used to be like, I need to get a clip in my college newspaper because where else am I going to write for it? Start a blog, write for someone. Everyone's looking for free writers these days. There are 8 million outlets. So there's no excuse for not writing and not being prolific and not having your stuff out there. And I think the key is to take advantage of that, and I really encourage young writers to sort of write and put your stuff out there and get all over Twitter, get all over Facebook, contact people and just make yourself known. Just because you're in Sioux Falls doesn't mean the editor of a huge magazine in New York City isn't going to know about you anymore, whereas in the past it was much harder to get noticed. Okay.
How does a good sports journalist write a good game story, be able to write their inspirational stories or stories about scandals? How can a good sports writer be able to write each one of those things good?
Well, it always comes down to the same thing to me, which is doggedness. You know, when I started out in sports writing, I was a crappy writer. I mean, I was a crappy reporter. I didn't know how to report. I really didn't. And what happened to me personally, I was writing for the Nashville Tennessean, and I kept making mistakes in my copy. And my editor, I thought I was going to get fired, and my editor put me on the cops beat, and the overnight cops beat. And all it was doggedness. Sit there, listen to a scanner. If there was something big enough, go after it, find out what happened, report. And the number one thing that I think, like there are 8 million college students who think they're the greatest writers ever, who can turn a quick phrase, who can write a catchy line or really, absorbing lead. But it's reporting that is the money quality and the money attribute in the really, really great reporters. If you want to break a good story, it's about developing sources. It's about knowing who to call. It's always about making the extra call. Don't just, you're doing, I'm reading a book right now. I won't say who it's by, but a biography of a former athlete. And I always look in the back and see how many people they interviewed for the book. And this guy interviewed like 60 sources. And my first instinct is 60 sources. Are you kidding me? I mean, my Walter Payton book, I interviewed almost 700 people. Like, there's always someone extra to call. There's always a different person to reach out to. I think it's actually a simple thing. Just call people. Call. Make contacts. Take someone out for a cup of coffee, and the stories end up coming to you, actually.
Okay. How does someone write become a good reporter and make those sources, be able to make those connections?
Well, it's a few things. One of my favorite quotes is, but when I was a kid, I used to recite all the time. Now I can't remember who said it, but it was, be wise in the use of your pronouns. Utter I once for every 20 times you utter you. And I think what I like about it is basically saying, be curious, ask people about themselves, engage people in conversations, if your beat is to cover, let's say you're supposed to cover college basketball for your paper. First thing you do, meet the coach, have coffee with the coach, have coffee with the athletic director. Is it okay with you if I check in with you every now and then? Sure. Can you give me a call if you think there are any, worthy things? Definitely. Show that you know your stuff. Do your background work. The best beat writers out there are the guys who just sort of absorb themselves in the teams and know everything going on about everything. If athletes respect people who know what they're talking about. If you go in, this sounds basic, but if you go into the Yankee clubhouse and you ask Derek Jeter how old he is, you've lost respect immediately. Know everything about the people you're writing about, and you will cultivate sources. And once you cultivate sources and you show them that you're serious about what you're doing, it all lines up. It really does. It sounds simple, but it's true. It all lines up once you cultivate sources.
What do you think the future of sports journalism is heading?
Well, sadly for me, I think it's heading away from print. Just because I'm a kid of newspapers and I love newspapers, and literally I'm probably the only guy now on my block who still gets the New York Times delivered. But I think journalism is figuring itself out and trying to figure out. A couple of years ago, no one knew how to make money off of websites. The New York Times was baffled by websites. Sports Illustrated baffled by websites. And they're really starting to figure it out. And I actually think it's opened up an avenue for a lot of really good writing and a lot of chances for them. I mean, if you look over the past few years at the number of really quality long-form sports journalism websites that are kicking around now. I mean, Grantland. I thought Grantland was going to last a week. It's fantastic. Sports on Earth. Sportsbook Nation is now running long features. Bleacher Report is blowing up. SI.com runs long features. I actually think it's starting to figure itself out, and eventually I think it's going to be as prolific, if not more prolific, than sort of newspapers during the heyday when everything was going great. So, I think it's confusing and a little baffling right now, but I actually think it's going to work out pretty well. Okay.
And then maybe the last question is what have you learned from your personal experiences in sports journalism?
I don't know if this is a great answer, but I'll say, today I was, I'm in the middle of finishing up my sixth book, and I'm sitting in a Starbucks, and I'm wearing flip-flops. I'm wearing a T-shirt and ratty T-shirt, University of Delaware T-shirt, some crappy shorts, drinking a coffee, right?
Yeah.
I spent the last year and a half flying around to L.A., interviewing different old Lakers, just like living a dream life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, most of the people I went to school with who decide to go into law or decide to go into business, they slog off on the train in the morning, they sit behind a desk answering calls or doing paperwork. It is the best freaking job in the world. I'm 20 years in, and it is a dream job for me, an absolute dream job. And it is just the absolute most fantastic choice I ever made, becoming a journalist. And I've never regretted it. People say, well, what were you going to do if you weren't going to? There is no what was I going to do. Was my dream, and I'm actually have the chance of living my dream. And I really encourage people, if they want to go into sports journalism, to follow it and just to work your ass off, because if you hit it and you make it big, it is a fantastic experience.
How do you interview people? Like, what are some good questions to ask during an interview?
There is no such thing to that answer. But,
no?
There's no, I never have a list of questions with me. I don't think there's a standard 5 questions you should ask. I think the best thing you can do going into an interview is know everything about the subject. Do your research beforehand, right? So, again, you're researching whoever you're doing a story on, some college basketball player, right? You don't want to ask them how old they are. You don't want to ask them where they were born or where they grew up. You have to know that stuff before going in. What you want an interview to become is a conversation. The best interviews are conversations. And, you listen to what they say and you respond to what they say. You don't just go on to your next question. So you feed off of what they're saying, and it becomes a conversation. And eventually, the ultimate goal is that they really forget they're in an interview, and it just is a conversation. And that's, when you have a good conversation going in life, in journalism, it's a beautiful thing. So I hope no one ever no one ever should tell you there are 5 questions or 3 questions you need to ask in an interview. What you need to do is know your stuff going in and have the guy realize that you respect him enough that you did, or a woman, that you respected them enough that you did your research and they feel comfortable talking to you.
Absolutely. I think that's about it. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I got nothing. But that was a good interview. I enjoyed it.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I've really been fortunate.
Good luck with it, man. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Send me some of your stories. I'll be happy to read them.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care.